Hi guys, welcome to the channel and welcome to this review of the long-awaited North Horizon Downwind board. Look, I've got to tell you, this is a bit of a unicorn board for me. It's one of my favorite ones I've used so far. If you stick around, I'll tell you exactly why. So let's talk a little bit about the background behind this board. So this is North's first downwind board. In fact, they're bringing out a new downwind range, which is really exciting, and I will do a full review of that in the coming weeks. But for now, we're just going to focus on the downwind board. Downwinding has been pretty mainstream for the last year and a half or so, and this is North's first offering. Now, with them being so late to the party, well, actually, there are some advantages with that. Firstly, being that they can learn from the mistakes and the successes of the other companies and have produced a board accordingly. And I have to say, they have hit the nail on the head with this one. My expectations of this board was that they were going to produce something that's very conservative. Now, North is a big company. They have to produce to the mass markets. They don't have the advantage that the smaller companies have to be able to produce boards on trend in a niche market. That being said, I was pleasantly surprised when I opened the board and I saw the dimensions and the shape. They really have gone down the performance route with the quality and durability that you'd expect from a big brand like North. So let's move now onto the dimensions of the board. So as reference, my 80 kilos, I ordered the 710 115 litres by 18.5 wide, and it is absolutely perfect for me. In fact, if I was to order a custom board, that would be exactly the dimensions I'd go for. So in terms of the other boards available, they've got a 610, which is 95 litres, a 75, which is 105 litres, a 710, 115 litres, and a 74, 125 litres. I think that's a really broad range. It covers a lot of the spectrum, and if you want to use it for just supping or downwinding, there's something for everybody there. Now, when I heard about the dimensions, I was a little bit excited, but at the same time nervous. They were very narrow, given that they are producing for the mass market. Now, all of that worry disappeared almost instantaneously when I jumped on the board because it's so stable. I'll talk about why that is in a moment, but really the key to any downwind board is stability. That has to override everything. Efficiency is nothing if you can't paddle that board up in a little bit of chop and a little bit of waves. You have to be solid on the board to be able to get the power strokes down. It's critical, and North have really focused on this, and I'm really happy they have done. It's rock solid in the water. Now, because it's so stable, you don't need to worry so much about the dims. So yes, it is slightly narrower than other boards out there on the market, but because of its stability, you can get away with that, and it makes it much more efficient, which means it paddles up easier. It's a real joy to use. At the beginning, I said that this board was very performance focused, which would suggest it wouldn't be great for beginners. Now, that all being said, because it's so stable, the larger size, the 8.4 125 litres, for somebody that's around 80 to 90 kilos, I absolutely think you could learn on that because it's so stable. And it would give you the longevity and the performance that you need for a year to even 3 years down the line. So the only dimension that I was slightly worried about was the thickness. So the 710 115 litres is 6.5 inches thick at the rear section. Now, on paper, that sounds pretty thick. And the reason why I was concerned about that is that is just adding extra distance between foot to foil, which generally relates to less control and a bit of a disjointed feeling. Now, I've been using it with the new 8-gem mast from North, the high modulus mast, and I have to say, it didn't even enter my mind when using it. It wasn't until I came off the water when a friend pointed out that it looked quite thick at the back. And the reason for that is because I felt so connected to the foil throughout. I could turn well, I could pump easily. I think that's down to the fact that it's rock solid, and that mast itself just translates all energy straight from the foil to your foot. You'll notice that all the volume is really at the rear of the board, and it really starts to thin out as you go towards the nose. In fact, where you stand, I think that's much less than 16.5 inches. It feels really natural and it feels very locked in. So let's move now on to the shape. Firstly, the underside is very complex. There's a lot of things going on there. In fact, you'd be forgiven for thinking that it's a little bit gimmicky, but you couldn't be further from the truth. The attention to detail is second to none. They've thought about everything and every element of it has a purpose. The board is effortless to paddle up, from flat water to minute bumps to big ocean swells. I've had zero problems getting this board up, and for me, that is one of the most important elements. So let's start with the front and work our way back. So at the front, you can see there's a very much displacement hull. It looks a little bit like a canoe, and the whole point of this is to increase efficiency, make it really fast in the displacement mode, allow it to release from the water, and then also for touchdowns, it just slaps and comes straight back up again. The big disadvantage of this type of hull shape is that they can be very tippy, so you have to do something later on in the board to be able to compensate for that. So as we move back towards the rear of the board, you'll see it starting to flatten out, but the big stabilizers are the bevels that make the board sit into the water and give you that stability. Now they're positioned exactly where you stand, so that when you are paddling before you're up on foil, those are really in the water. You're not sat on top of it, you're sat in the water, and that is what gives it the stability that I love. Now, as we move to the very rear of the board, you can see it's very much pointed. And I think this helps with the tracking as you're paddling. It's just another element you don't have to think about. Yes, of course, you still need the technique of paddling straight, but it definitely does help with tracking when you're trying to paddle up. For me, I've found that that has been the difference between sometimes getting up and not getting up. And lastly, the rear of the board, well, it's a very flat section. And what that does is as the wave hits the back of the board, it just gives you that extra little bit of push. Now, when you combine all those factors in together, you are talking about a board that's effortless to paddle up. In fact, it's one of the easiest boards I've used to get up onto the foil. A combination of the fact that it's very efficient, it's very stable, we've talked about both of those, but it also allows you to do the pumping motion with your feet, so you're not just relying on paddling speed. And that's something coming from a non-paddle background I've found really useful. So just to clarify on that, look, there's two ways of being able to get up onto foil. One of them is just to paddle as fast as you can, and then you get a flow over the foil, and then it just releases as it creates lift. And the other way is to actually like pump as you would do proning and generate your own forward momentum. Now, obviously, when you're paddling and when you're subfoiling, you're doing a combination of both, but some boards lend themselves to one style or the other. And I think this literally sits bang in the middle of being able to get speed and also bounce off the water to be able to get up onto foil. So let's move on to the top deck. Now, in comparison, this is very simple, almost flat across the whole section. You'll see there's a very graceful teardrop shape to the entire board, with the width exactly where you need it in the middle where you stand, and then it drops away, it tapers away really quickly both onto the nose and onto the rear. It feels really good when you're pumping it, and the swing weight is minimal. The deck grip itself, well look, I've been really impressed with this. Even when the board is fully submerged, there is ample traction. That cannot be said for all boards that I have used. Sometimes when boards go under the water, you feel very slippery, and that can be the difference between getting up onto foil and not. On the deck grip itself, there are these rails, these raised areas that give you this tactile feel, so you can feel where your foot is, especially if you like to be offset, which is something that I do. And it really is a nice feature. It also helps with climbing back onto the board when you inevitably fall off at some stage. And lastly, the color of the deck grip itself, well actually that's really important because it allows you to see where your foot is in relation to the mast. For me, my back foot goes right behind the North symbol between the grey and the black, and I know that my foot is then directly over the mast, so I can adjust accordingly if it's in the wrong position. One thing that I forgot to talk about when I was discussing the underside is the positioning and length of the tracks. So the tracks are positioned optimal for modern downwind foils. And what I mean by that is it's really far forward. The reason for that is it reduces the swing weights and allows your body to go nice and far forward. We're pretty much standing in the middle of the board, which means that the length feels much smaller when you're up onto the foil. Also, I do want to talk about the drop box system from North. Look, I have to say, I absolutely love that. If you have a North mast with this board, it is seamless when you're putting the board in and out. You don't have to mess around with screws and bolts. It just works really well. And yeah, so it's a really good marketing system that they've used, because it means you've got to go and buy one of their masts to get the most out of it. But it does work really well. So let's move now on to the pointy end of the review, which is the on-water experience. I've used it in a whole host of different conditions and different disciplines, and it has really excelled at all of them. So for me, the three top positives of this board are the following. The stability given the dimensions. Now, I talked about that earlier on, but that blew my mind. We've got performance and we've got stability at the same time, and that for me is why it's such a unicorn board. This leads nicely into the next positive, which is the ease of paddling up. Now, for me, that is one of the bugbears of downwinding, is that if you can't paddle a board up with a suitable foil, there's no point being out there at all. And this just allows my technique to be pretty ropey and rubbish at times, because I can get away with it, make mistakes, and get up onto foil and start downwinding and having fun. Now, obviously, this is thanks to the shape and the dimensions of the board. It is evident that North has put a lot of time and effort into the development and research, not only with their pro riders, but with more average people. And I think that's really commendable. And my last positive point is how balanced and direct it feels when you're on foil, which, let's face it, that's what we're all here for, is to have fun downwinding on foil. And this board produces that in bucket loads. So let's move now on to the disadvantages that I found with this board. Look, I know this is going to sound like a cop-out, but I genuinely can't think of anything that I dislike about this board. Look, I'm scratching the bottom here, but maybe the color scheme, I wasn't a big fan of that at the beginning, but really that's grown on me too. The price point, look, it's not the cheapest board out there, but it's certainly not the most expensive. It's pretty much in the middle of the market. Weight wise, look, it's not the lightest, but again, it's not the heaviest. It just feels comfortable. I genuinely can't think of anything that I dislike about this board. And that screams volumes about the quality and the performance that North have delivered. In summary, the North Horizon board is a double thumbs up from me. I absolutely love it. This is going to be my go-to board now for pretty much all disciplines. The attention to detail is second to none, but the bit that I love about it more than anything else is the shape and dimensions lead itself to performance, but the stability leads itself to accessibility. It's a great all-round board, and I will definitely be recommending it to my friends. Not only is this an outstanding board for North's first edition, I hand on heart say that this is the best board that I've used to date for an all-round performance. They have produced an absolute blinder with this board. I highly recommend you go out, go and demo one, and I guarantee you it'll put a massive smile on your face. I hope you enjoyed this. If you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to type in below. I'll get back to you as soon as I can, and I'll see you on the water again soon.